you look at the history of Titusville, space goes up, space comes down. People that were literal rocket scientists at NASA that are not homeless.
It's crazy. The level of anxiety of the homeless population right now is off the charts.
The problem is, how do you enforce the law? And how do you do that in a compassionate way? So what our police department did was they created a community service unit. They went out there with the approach of, can we get you the resources you need? Not you just have to move along. We average 9 touches per 1 arrest. So it's not like, hey, we're going to lock you up if you don't move. It's a lot of hand holding, a lot of helping. Unfortunately, just, at a certain point, they got to do their job. Otherwise, they're going to hold our city, responsible for that as well. And we're really, really proud of the fact that over the last year, we've gotten 30 folks off the street and into homes and into jobs. Mm-hmm. So that's a success.
That's huge. There's a lot of moving pieces, and I see Titusville, making that extra effort to understand what those pieces are.
Hi everyone, I'm Tracy Lewis from Imagine Marketing. I'm joined with Pastor Scott, who's the founder and CEO of Matthews Hope, as well as Mayor Andrew Connors from Titusville, Florida. Mr. Mayor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
In this episode, we will be talking with the mayor about the homeless crisis here in Florida, what factors have caused it, what is being done to address it, and how local municipalities can partner with experts like Matthews Hope to achieve better outcomes. Welcome to episode 76 of Straight Talk No BS with Matthews Hope, presented by Imagine Marketing. Imagine Marketing is a full-service marketing firm based in Winter Garden, Florida. At Imagine Marketing, we put in the extra effort to craft a tailored strategy for success. We also offer photography, videography, and even podcast production services. So book your free consultation today. We now will take you to part 2 of our conversation with the mayor about the homeless crisis here in Florida. So you were on the North Brevard Commission of Parks and Recreation. When you are planning a new park in a public space, what considerations do you give to those that may need to call that or another public space home?
Well, interesting thing about the Commission on Parks and Recreation, because I mentioned that was my first step into, servant leadership, so to speak, here in Titusville. That's an advisory board to the county. And I learned that, they don't necessarily care about our advice, so to speak.
Okay.
How do I say that quietly without, upsetting everybody? But it's the truth. We used to meet monthly. We had volunteers that worked on the board that literally locked parks up at night.
Yeah.
That's how much they volunteered. Because it was just a bunch of volunteers that cared about parks and wanted to give input and feedback and help out. And the county then regulated how often we can meet to once a quarter. I barely see anybody on that commission. Mm-hmm. I also am no longer on that commission because now I'm mayor. But then again, I'm right back there because I'm the city's liaison back to that. So it's actually kind of cool how things come full circle. And I want to definitely keep my finger on the pulse with our parks. We have 566 acres of parks in our city.
Wow. I did not know.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't think we need any more new parks. I think we need to revision how we experience parks. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I tell folks all the time, there's a bunch of folks that like to look at birds. I'm not one of those people. There might be a lot of more younger people that also do not see themselves taking their 7-year-old to go look at birds. Maybe for about a minute, but then, the ADD of a 7-year-old is going to ramp up. And
the ADD of a 63-year-old is going to,
Yep, exactly. So I think we need to refocus on what recreation looks like. Obviously, pickleball is a fast-growing sport. We need to think about that. Unfortunately, the regulation in Titusville is so burdensome that our Parks and Rec department, so how it works in Titusville is they're city-owned parks, but our maintenance is done by the county.
Okay.
An agreement where they take care of all of our maintenance.
Oh.
Which, or structurally, sometimes that makes sense because they already have the tools and they're already doing it in North Brevard. So, okay. They have the money to put down more pickleball courts at our Singleton Park. They cannot get through the regulation of the city of Titusville. Mm. And that's a challenge because, again, I mentioned the 30 years of overregulation. When you create regulation to prevent a quote unquote eel developer from developing, that regulation cuts both ways. Mm. And impacts our parks department. They have the sign for over 2 years to put up a new sign at Sandpoint Park. They cannot get a sign permit because their regulation is too tough.
Oh, no.
They have the money to tear down the pavilion at Wusthof Park and build a new one with the kitchen. Cannot get through our regulation.
Wow.
They were going to redo a park in the more socioeconomically depressed area of town, right next to the Boys and Girls Club, put up new playground equipment. But they wanted to put a few parking spots in for the police to sit there and make sure the kids were safe while they do their paperwork. It was going to cost them too much money because of all the regulation to put in parking. So you see these things and you go, okay, why are we making things harder for ourselves just because of maybe, somebody 20, 30 years ago decided that this law would be a good law. I think government is very good at putting in a law, and then if it doesn't work, they put in 10 more to fix the first one. When really we should just, repeal that law. So it
Sounds very biblical, actually.
Government's very interesting, to say the least. But
from the, I was just thinking about how the Jews did it, and going through seminary, it was we just kept adding. Somehow we go from the 10 Commandments. I'm trying to remember, it was like 661 or something. I've been out of seminary for a while. Of different laws, and all of a sudden there was a law that contradicted the other law. But you had to get through all of it, and unfortunately, and I empathize with you because one thing I've learned over the years is that, again, rarely the municipalities share ideas with each other, but then you bring the county in, and I don't care what county it is, but the county has a way of their thinking it should be, and nobody, in my opinion, is stepping back to go, well, how do we make this work? We know how it won't work.
Yep.
How can we make it work? And instead, what happens is often those projects just get abandoned.
Absolutely.
And like I said, investment then into the community. An investment can, again, cut both ways. I know I've seen some things in Winter Garden that, I warned some of East Winter Garden community years ago. It was strange because East Winter Garden is mostly a Black community that I'm very well received in. And what I found is they were bringing these stud people come do studies on how do we kind of redevelop this area. And there was arguments between the younger Black community and the older Black community. The older Black community is what we like it the way it is.
Yeah.
The younger Black community says, well, can we kind of like these cute little houses, what have you? And what I said to him in the process, I said, look, I'm a white guy. I only so much I can say. I mean, I grew up in a Black neighborhood, but I'm a white guy. There's only so much I can empathize and understand this. But I said, here's the thing. If you're not careful, while you're all arguing between yourselves, they're already changing everything.
Yeah. So, Scott, you recently stirred up a lot of engagement with a social media post that included a sign outside of a public park. Is that right?
So, yes, there's times that I will post things that get people a little fired up towards me, what have you. But I find it ironic that we're seeing a sign about everybody being welcome, except knowing that the gentleman that was homeless in the wheelchair there was asked to leave. So, and the only reason he was asked to leave was he was homeless. Okay, and first off, most people don't know this gentleman's stories. We did. How he became in that wheelchair, what have you, serving others and what have you. And I just thought it very ironic that we would have this welcome sign. I mean, I can listen, there's nobody, I even laugh sometimes when I leave here each day and I live in Merritt Island. And when you go down 520, if I go down Forest and 520 cross, I see these really cool, this artwork of people sitting on benches. Okay. Except the benches have been removed. Okay. And so it was, unfortunately, it's like many places, it's usually just a few people making the big stink, but people are more likely to talk about something they don't like than something that they do like. And so, I just made this comment about, how do we sit there and say welcome, but not you? Not do I also think that it was like kind of weird that where they put a pickleball ball here when I know this particular park and the other things that are going on there. I did, but you know what? I don't care so much about that as I did moving people on just for no other reason. I mean, he wasn't like he was laying down. It wasn't like he was sleeping. He was simply there, but it made people uncomfortable. So he was asked to leave. And I just find that that's just a tough one for me to swallow.
How is Titusville responding to the laws prohibiting sleeping in public spaces?
Yeah, it's a great question. I got to give all credit to our police chief, John Lau, who had a forward thinking, proactive approach to, I wouldn't say the problem is the homelessness. The problem is how do you enforce the law, right? Because that's unfortunately what police are tasked to do with is enforce the law. And how do you do that in a compassionate way? So what our police department did was they created a community service unit.
Mm.
So the young officer that you met who didn't talk much, her name's Hannah, and she was a part of this unit. And they went out and got to know the homeless population. They also use some data analytics to see where some of the hotspots were in terms of mostly crime, petty crime, and things like that. And just let them know that, like, hey, we're here to enforce the laws, unfortunately. And so if you're setting up an encampment, we got to break it up. But how long do you need? Do you need help?
Mm-hmm.
They went out there with the approach of, can we get you the resources you need? Not you just have to move along.
Yeah.
No, we're going to trespass you. They went out there and they have literature and they go, all right, do you need, mental health counseling? All right, here's the resource for that. Do you need us to drive you? Do you need health care? We'll take you out to Space Coast Health Centers. Do you need a cold night shelter? We'll take you to Life Point. Whatever it was, they kind of went above and beyond to try to help these folks, get some success. And we're really, really proud of the fact that over the last year, we've gotten 30 folks off the street and into homes and into jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a success.
That's huge.
We of course then we don't know if we're making a dent, right? Because the point in time.
You made a dent, I promise you.
Yeah.
But you have the empathy.
Mhm.
And,
That's 30 more there was.
Yeah, exactly.
and the department's taking steps forward.
Exactly. So now what those officers are doing that worked on that unit, they're cross-training the other police officers. And, then
And they teach this to all the other departments. If we request that, this trickle down into all the other departments,
yeah,
in other counties.
I will say that, I have not had a chance to sit down with the chief, but I will tell you that his officers, his I think there's, like I said, his commander was there. We had some majors there, captain, I believe, a lieutenant. I mean, this is your top brass in the organization, and they all, and this is not something I hear all the time. In fact, I don't hear it all very often. Is they raved about their chief and the way he changed the whole environment of the department when he came on board, I believe about 10 years ago, and was just very forward thinking of things that they were going to be facing and trying to look for ways that do we really want to just arrest these people because they need a place to sleep?
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, it's their job to enforce the law. It's a rub. It's tough. But I will also tell you that here in Cocoa and Rockledge, we've had some officers that have been really good with this kind of stuff, trying to connect people with resources and not wanting to just be that guy that keeps waking you up. Now, the other side, I'll tell you, is that one challenge we're seeing across Brevard and Orange County, and those are the only places I can speak of because that's where we serve, is the level of anxiety of the homeless population right now is off the charts.
Yeah.
We're seeing more talk of suicide than we ever have before. People are being sometimes moved 2 and 3 times a night, and they're exhausted. And I've watched grown men, big grown men, just sob like kids, like babies, because they're so exhausted. And then I've seen stuff where I've watched people that have been arrested because the guy had PTSD and now he's been woken up a couple times, and his natural reaction was to come up, protecting himself. And now he's assaulted a police officer. That was never his intent.
Right.
Your husband's a police officer. I'm sure he comes home and tells you the challenges they're being faced. And I really feel for the police departments because and I feel for the municipalities because, really, quite honestly, our state legislators, they dump this on the cities. No one convinced me any of that. I went up to Tallahassee and I spoke to some of these folks about the lack of, I try to explain to them, our budget's $15 million a year. The entire budget for the state of Florida is only $35 million. The math doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work no matter how you do it. I'm watching us push more money for additional prisons and stuff like that. And I'm sitting there going, do you know, there was a study done, and you could probably find it. The Seminole the Sheriff's Department did it. Seminole County Sheriff's Department did it a number of years ago. And they did a study what it cost to incarcerate a homeless person. And what it came out to is $45,000 to $55,000 a year.
Blows my mind.
And I went, my God, if I had $45,000 to $55,000 for every single person that we've served, we do 1,000 touches a week just in my organization, I'll take care of your problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. But sometimes it's that old saying, pay me now or pay me later. And for some reason, we're still stuck on pay me later. Let's wait until it's a complete disaster. Now we'll approach it. You know, it's like, oh, you got a leaky faucet. You know, you ought to fix that. Yeah, it's not that bad.
A little Scotch tape.
And that's always like government, you know, whether it's cities working together or counties or state interaction, it's always robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? And it's the pass the buck mentality. But I would say we average 9 touches per one arrest. So it's not like, hey, we're gonna lock you up if you don't move. It's a lot of hand holding, a lot of helping, and unfortunately, it just at a certain point they got to do their job, right? And otherwise, they're gonna hold our city responsible for that as well.
Oh, absolutely, and it does put you in interesting because here's the other part too, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, mental health, and. What I tell people all the time, I was in a meeting this past week, and out of the point in time count in Orange County, that only 6% were mentally ill. Well, I think when you say 6% of what on the streets is mentally ill, because the reality of it is I fall in a category of being mentally ill. I have dealt with depression my entire life. I tried to take my life at one time. I fit in that category.
Yeah.
I'm not someone that typically someone's going to point at me. Well, people really know me, maybe.
Yeah.
But most of them are going to say, that guy's mentally ill. Mm-hmm. What I tell people, if you didn't have a mental health issue before you were homeless, you will once you become homeless. What that does to the psyche is huge. And so you got a lot of people who are depressed, high anxiety, a lot of stuff going on that plays into this. And then you have these folks that, quite honestly, and there's no really place to put them, they're seriously mentally ill and they're a danger to our community. And the problem with that is that there's no resources to address that. And all you really can do is probably arrest them. You can often Baker Act them. It's going to be a 72-hour turnaround. They're going to be back on the streets. Mm-hmm. And I've been convinced that what would happen if we took that same money and we actually addressed the issue. I'm fully convinced that most of our drug and alcohol problems would disappear if we dealt with mental illness because people are self-medicating. Mm-hmm. 20 milligrams of Zoloft might change their life, but they don't have access.
Right.
The fact that we've been able to, through our psychiatric nurse practitioner and my mental health care team, take people that were severely mentally ill and put them on the right path makes me wonder, well, what could happen if we just simply dealt with the everyday basics of being homeless and what that does to somebody, especially men. Yeah. Men become very broken. Men are very, very, I've often said they're very much defined by what they do. And women don't do that so much. Women, are single moms, my favorite people. They're a pain in the ass when you start out, but they will cry. But once they hunker down, they're going to get it done. Men often look like they've, and I'm talking about educated people here, they have lost their career or they lost their ability to be a man in their mind, and they all of a sudden can't function. And it's really sad to see. And I think that if we approach that and address those things and invested in those people, we would probably save ourselves a whole lot of money and a whole lot of aggravation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what you heard when you came to our consortium on homeless meeting that we had last week was, real world stories of that happening. I mean, we had people that were literal rocket scientists at NASA that are not homeless, So unfortunately,
we've had them.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Unfortunately, then again, if there is a mental health underlying issue that they were getting treatment or help for, who become homeless, now that's a bigger problem, right? So it's a challenge all around.
Well, and I do see, Titusville over the years, not living there, but living in Florida almost my entire life. What you knew about Titusville is that you have a lot of the space program supporting that community. And so it was feast or famine all the time. And every time there was a stop for whatever reason, the space program, my hope now, we'll see how it works out, is just from the standpoint that there are several companies now. It's not just NASA. There's several companies that maybe it'll level out some. Now, my concern now is finances and what kind of money is going to be put towards the space program or not. So we'll see.
Well, if we're going to talk economic development real quick, that is definitely my concern. Again, you look at the history of Titusville, space goes up, space comes down. History repeats itself. And right now it's like the stock market in the 80s.
Sure.
It's never coming down. At some point it will.
Yes.
Texas is spending hundreds of millions of dollars to try to steal space away from us. Our state agency doesn't have any money in the budget to attract and retain companies. Just last night, the county commission voted to dissolve the North Brevard Economic Development Zone, which provided grants for redevelopment to entice companies to come to Titusville and North Brevard more specifically. So that is definitely a concern. And so I'm working with some local partners to try to look at privatizing economic development so we can focus on training our next generation for the jobs of tomorrow. And, unfortunately, we're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And again, I can see where the puck's going. And so I'm just trying to put the pieces in place now. Like I said, it's not about the next 4 years.
Yeah.
It's about the next 15.
Yeah.
But we are very fortunate that we do have a mental health hospital in Titusville, Palm Point Behavioral Health.
Yeah.
I actually this week had an opportunity to tour their facility and see what they're doing. They actually are just opening up a 11 to 17-year-old more residential kind of treatment wing to address that, because again, we're trying to get ahead of the problem. And so they're doing a good job. And what I thought was really interesting is they told me that they don't just Baker Act people. They talk to them about a voluntary admission because, they said the length of stay is actually longer when they actually get them to buy in and be here.
Voluntary is so much, yeah.
And I thought that was very, very fascinating because in my mind, I'm like, well, if I come in voluntary, I can leave voluntary. Like I was concerned.
Right,
They're like,
right.
no, they actually stay longer when they do it voluntarily. And so I thought that was amazingly proactive and forward thinking about how their process is. So just the opportunity to learn about what they do and being able to share that in the community with my voice, because unfortunately, people come to you as the mayor thinking you can solve everybody's problems.
Right.
I can tell you very quickly, my powers in city government are very, very limited. I can, I run the meetings, I can call special meetings, and I can make proclamations. So officially, I proclaimed I'm the tallest man in Titusville, which is very much not the case. But I proclaimed
Love it.
And I proclaimed him my vice mayor as the shortest guy in Titusville. But
good. Yeah.
outside of that, like all I have is a title, but I have a voice. And now that voice goes further. So the goal is to use that voice to connect dots in the community and make it easier for things to get done within the city. So
and I see you as we always talk about, we're a facilitator of opportunity. What you're doing is you're facilitating opportunity. You're bringing people to the table. A lot of people do not understand how government works. They actually think the president's run the country, which may be different now. I don't know. But the truth is, there's a lot more going on there. And what I see, and I commend you for, is that I'm a fan, and I'm not a fan very often when it comes to politics. Anybody knows me know that's true. But you're doing what you can, not what you can't. And to me, that's kind of how I grew Matthew Soap. I couldn't do medical 15 years ago. Now I can. I didn't have mental health, but now I do. And again, it was bringing people to the table, finding out what resources we had, where we could kind of, in my mind, there's a whiteboard always behind me, and I'm moving pieces around constantly. How do we do this for the good of all? And so, Mayor, I appreciate you doing that, because I see it, I've witnessed it, and I don't know if it'll get you elected a second time, but if people are paying attention, it will. If people remain selfish, maybe not, because unfortunately we've become a very selfish society.
Yeah.
What we care about is what affects us, and until it, and then all of a sudden, and what's very interesting lately for me is to watch people that have, our last episode, we talked with Lori, and Lori's one of our guests here that is now in our Moving Forward program. And prior to being homeless, she kind of just didn't really give a lot of thought to homelessness either.
Right.
Never happened to me.
Yep.
Okay. Till she had a triple bypass surgery suddenly.
Scott, in episode 69, episode 69, you talked about the sleeper buses. Can you remind people that are listening about what the sleeper bus initiative is?
Yeah. I mean, we're real excited about it. We have contracted for 3 of them so far. We have a couple organizations, I should say some municipalities actually, that are interested in possibly having one in their backyard on a regular basis. So there might be more, but we're starting out with 3 that will be on the road by summer. The first one is being converted as we speak. I should have it in my hands in the next maybe 3 weeks. And what will allow people to do is simply give them a safe, warm, or cool place to sleep for the night. We will come into an area that someone allows us to come into, and we come in the evening. Most people won't even realize we're there. They will spend the night. We'll use a reservation system to do that, and we will limit how many nights they can stay, so everybody has a chance to get a couple nights sleep a week. And hopefully, the plan is to partner with other nonprofits that maybe can offer some additional services. And if need be, we can bring them into Cocoa for the day and get the haircuts and the showers and the medical care and what have you. But there's a lot of people that have those pieces in other communities. And so our thinking is we just want to be the end also, because one of the biggest issues, especially with this new law, is what do you do with these folks? There's no place to go. And people that get good rest are very different people. And so our thinking and our hope is that won't solve homelessness by any stretch of the imagination, but what it will do is those buses will get us about 60 people off the streets at night, and then what we hope to be able to do is connect them with additional resources and continue to build relationships with cities and police departments and what have you, so that they realize there's a resource out there. Like I said, it's limited. Like everything else we do, there's limited money, there's limited resources across the board, but I think it's a step in the right direction. I mean, ultimately, we have to have affordable housing. We have to. I mean, quite honestly, you look. I live in a 1963 block home.
Yep.
My home's pretty cool inside. We've done some work, but you know how many hurricanes that thing has sat through? Okay, I mean, since 1963, and the point being is that we can build homes that don't have to be huge, that can withstand a storm. We keep building these sticks on the with sticks on the beach, which makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Previously, like a float.
Yeah, maybe that's it. They'll float away. I just never. I've lived in Florida my whole life, and there has been a change, whether you believe in climate change or not. The bottom line is, as a kid, we never worried about. In fact, I don't remember ever hunkering down for a hurricane. I just don't. And I've lived in Brevard County now for the last 6 years, and I can't tell you how many times we've had to hunker down, and that we've opened in the last 3 years, because we're coming up on our 30th anniversary here in Brevard, is we've opened up several times for hurricanes. And again, where would those people have gone? There wasn't a place to go. That's why we did it. And this last time, I think we did 110 people. Probably could have done more. So I think with the sleeper buses, like I said, the plan is to have them on the road 365 days a year. They'll have security, they'll have cameras, they'll have all the things people concern themselves with, and I think we can make it work.
What a good opportunity for them to get rest. Mayor, what did you first think when you learned about these sleeper buses?
Well, I thought they're a great idea, and the thing I love about Scott, him and I kind of think of the same wavelength of, don't tell me what I can't do, tell me how I can do it. And if you can't find a way, I'm gonna come out outside the box and come up with a way. Like maybe I should have been a lawyer or something.
You still got time.
Exactly. But I heard about it and we chatted about it, and I was asking our police force, like, hey, could we do this? Could we, park them on city property or what have you, or at the park? And they're like, no, that's still in violation of the law. And I'm like, okay, well, let me talk to some people. Start talking around with some of the groups or people that are in our little coalition. And they're like, well, I got property. Okay, boom, we solved that problem.
Nice.
So again, just thinking outside the box a little bit and just making connections to be able to fulfill the need.
Right.
And when we look at this population, we're never going to solve it, but we got to make an impact in terms of decreasing the frequency, the severity, the duration. In my business as a benefits consultant, I always look at how can we decrease the frequency and severity of claims. And in terms
It's
of
the same thing.
So and then for you add in duration, right? How can we get them the resources they need quicker to get them back on their feet on their own, being a productive member of society or involved in their families' lives or whatever it may be, right? I mean, but all those things are going to take some time, but it's one of those things I'm committed to help make our community even better than what it is.
And what?
And I just want to throw this in because it was interesting. I had a conversation with one of the county commissioners in Orange County just yesterday because I said, I find it interesting that the way this law was written, 1365, you read through the whole thing and it's like this big. It's not that very long. Trust me, I'm dyslexic and
You got through it.
Okay, and I got through it real easy. It states two things, and one that these arrests are possible and likely to happen. It also says this: if a private owner gives you permission to park and sleep, you can.
Wow.
We already have people that want to say, well, that area wasn't zoned for that.
Mm.
So how do we enforce one part of the law, but not the second part?
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting. The other thing is with churches are exempt from a lot of different things that people don't realize they're exempt from under their 501c3 religious organizations. So there's a lot of things will happen. I do expect we'll see some pushback and what have you. But I think that it's kind of like when I came to town here, the neighbors, some of them went nuts. They went nuts, but because they didn't ask the questions. They would walk the entire community to get a what's it called when they petition done, right? But they wouldn't walk a block and a half from their house to come here and see what was going on.
Yeah.
The ones that did, they went, oh my gosh, this wasn't what I expected. It's so clean. It's so nice. My gosh, we just got, we were literally just in People magazine, just came out for this place here. We helped a family. She's through it's like similar to Make-A-Wish, and I apologize, I can't remember the name right now.
I don't remember it either.
But they help people with weddings, and what happens? They approached us to do a wedding for a couple who she's going to pass away, and they wanted to get married, and so we put together about a $50,000 wedding for them, with a bunch of vendors and what have you. We were part of that. And it's kind of crazy that that's happening on a place that serves homeless.
Right.
But also should give you some perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. Why are people wanting to get married here when, it's so horrible? Why are my average volunteer over the age of 65 and female? Mm-hmm. How dangerous is this place?
Right.
Now, that said, we do background checks. We have cameras. I got 50 cameras on this property. There's not much you can do here I won't see. You take precautions because you're smart. That's how you eliminate a lot of your future problems. So,
yeah.
Well, now I'm a little embarrassed. I picked my nose on the way out here.
I probably got on camera. Just tell me where it was at, and I'll send you a picture of yourself.
Me too.
That's awesome.
What goals and metrics for success do you have in place for addressing the homelessness crisis in the area?
Well, I think the data is still being compiled and collected, especially as we went through our first year with this community service unit to see what kind of impact we're making. Because, again, the point in time counts were inaccurate from 23 to 24 in Brevard County. According to those counts, we're just over 1,000 homeless. And again, if that was the case, Matthew's Hope was serving.
Probably continued to be inaccurate by the sound of it.
But I think the work that our organizations are doing to get an accurate count is going to make a difference in terms of, okay, how do we access grant money? What resources can we use to put towards this? And then, our police force is doing a good job of, again, just documenting just so that we can have an accurate picture of what the problem is, right? And then once we have that picture, then we can look at, okay, what's our goals, right? Because we can't put a goal in place that we don't even know where we're starting.
Yes.
So just from that point alone, I'm excited about the information we're collecting so that we can try to make a difference, because like I said, we got 30 folks off the streets and jobs into homes, but what percentage was that, and I think that's what people look like, okay, did you actually make a dent? Do we have 400 homeless in Titusville? Do we have 500? I've heard so many different numbers that I don't know the real answer. It's a guess. So hopefully we can get more fine-tuned in our data collection so that we can make a real impact.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very fair and thought out answer, because it's there's so many things that play into this, and I know we got to close out here soon, but one of the things that we talked about with Orange County, with the group that I was sitting with the last couple of days, was the number of students that were identified came out to about 8,000 in Orange County.
Yeah.
So that's separate from the PIT count. Okay. So when you look at that, if that data is correct, then this issue is so much bigger, because if we're not careful, what we'll do is then we're going to develop generational homelessness. And so we need to address that also. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and I see Titusville, making that extra effort to understand what those pieces are. And you can't fix something. And I hate using the word fix, because you can't address a crisis not really knowing what that looks like. What is the actual crisis? And I think they're trying to make that effort to do that. So again, I commend you. And if you talk to the chief, tell him this, I'm a fan. And that's just not anybody that knows me. It's not that I go after people, because I don't. Okay. But I'll also tell people what I think and what I've seen. But I think it's fair also that if you're going to do that, you also say what you think and what you saw. And what I think and what I saw was pretty damn good. And I'm looking forward to doing whatever we can do to help the city of Titusville address the crisis, along with some really good folks down that way. They got some very dedicated folks. And even what we do some things differently, what have you, I always have an appreciation for those that are willing to stay in the foxhole. Because most will run.
Exactly. It's all about rolling up your sleeves and doing the work. And, as we, kind of get ready to wrap up, just to put in perspective, Scott mentioned how long our county is. And so we're definitely in silos. Population in this county of this size normally would have a level 1 trauma center. We do not.
Okay.
We have a level 2.
That perspective.
So again, we're so scattered in our resources, and it's really hard to address anything. And so when I was running, I didn't say what I was going to do. I just told people what I believed. And, I believe that we need to work together if we're going to be successful, just because of the siloing effect across the county. And if we're doing it to ourselves just on the north end of the county, we're just chasing our tail.
Sure.
And anytime we have resources coming from south of 528, I win. That's what I tell people all the time. I go, my job as mayor is to take care of business at home, but also represent the city to the other entities, to the county government, state government, whoever it is. So anytime I get a nonprofit, for-profit government resources from Southern Brevard to Northern Brevard, because people in Southern Brevard think the county line is 528. So that's why I said 528. Just take the D line to Orlando. But anytime I get them to cross that line, we win in the city of Titusville. I say I win, but it's really we win.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate Matthew's Hope for taking that leap and coming north of 528, getting their passport stamped on the way up. Just coming up there and be a part of the conversation and dialogue, and hopefully we can all come together and be a part of the solution.
That's amazing. Thank you both for being here, especially you, Mayor. Thank you. And thank you all for watching and listening. Please like, subscribe, share, so we can help Matthew's Hope get this message out there.
Talk to your mayors, city managers, your police chiefs. If you want to have a lot of fun, contact your state legislators, because they're the ones that are kind of they're kind of creating the roadmap that is very unclear that we have to try to figure out how to follow.
And don't forget to follow Andrew Connors, Mayor of Titusville, on Facebook, Instagram, and now TikTok.
There you go. You got TikTok?
I have somebody that has it for me.
I got to watch it. I
do not have it on my phone.
I'm actually going to go on.
I'm looking now. Yeah.
All right. Thank you all.